Hey guys, it's ShadowFlyer. Today I want to talk about phase 2 and 3 of air assault. So if you haven't seen my prior videos on the arrival and processing, 0 day, and phase 1, be sure to check out my air assault playlist, and there's plenty of information for you there. But phase 2, so day 4 of air assault, starts off with a 4-mile run. This was actually a really fun PT for us because this is all we really did was just the run, and it was a nice steady pace. It wasn't hard. I don't think that we lost a single person on the run, and they told us the night before, like they always do in the briefing, that we were going to go on the run, and they told us to prepare some what we call jodies and what the Army calls just cadences. They just wanted us to make sure we didn't run in silence, and they told us not to call the C-130 rolling down the strip one because they said they hear it all the time and they wanted some variety, and we still managed to hear that jody twice. The Air Force makes us, or at least my detachment makes us memorize jodies because when we go to field training, it's not required for us to use them, but it's highly encouraged. And so what the detachments have kind of done is, if it's highly encouraged, they say, okay, we want to enforce it just so that when they get to field training, it's not a huge issue. Enough people know them that they can call them without any issues. But Army, from what I understand, ROTC does not do that. Most people didn't know any jodies or cadences. Some people memorized them just for fun. A few of them said they came from places where it was encouraged, but it was probably a 1 to 10 ratio of how many people actually knew them. So they had all the people that wanted to call them or knew any in the leftmost column while we were running, and even that one column was not filled completely with people that knew them. But that's fine, we still had plenty of people calling them to get through the run. I actually tried calling a few, and I thought about calling some Air Force ones just to kind of have some fun, but decided not to. I called one that I actually heard at field training, and I messed it up a little bit. Not much, but I mispronounced one of the words, and because it's a rhyming thing, when I mispronounced it, it didn't quite have the same effect that it was supposed to. So I had more I was planning to call after that, but the air assault sergeant that was following along just yelled next and had the next guy come up, so it felt like a little bit of defeat in my heart, but I at least called one, and I tried my best, so there's that. So after the run, we went back, took our shower, and we went out to the Slingloading station, which is right by the rappel tower. This is where we were almost the entire day, other than when we went back to the classroom to eat or just to wait. So they went to the sling loads. They were all not set up, and what I mean by that is they were showing us how to prepare the load. So even though this isn't something that we're tested on, they want us to make sure we understand how it's loaded, because if you understand how it's loaded, it's easier to figure out when something's wrong. But what they did is they showed us exactly how somebody would load it, where you put rope where you tape certain items. They showed us the entire sequence for how someone would set this up if they wanted to make a sling load. After that, they had all the sling loads set up, but they were in what we call the clean configuration, meaning they were set up properly. There weren't any issues with them, so you would then go from station to station looking at all the various loads, and we would practice our test, but with a clean configuration. So instead of getting timed and looking for deficiencies in the two minutes you have, they gave us 3 minutes to start just because we were new at this. Then they moved it to 2. But from there, we had our time, and then during that time, we would just look over the entire sling load and just note all the different points that when they prepare the sling load, they told us all the inspection points, all the things to check, and that's what we did. We just practiced our sequences and getting it down fast so that the next day it wouldn't be an issue. For lunchtime, we went back to the classroom and ate. We were given about half an hour to 40 minutes, and because it was a Sunday, we also had a optional church service. So when we went back to the classroom to eat, there was the chaplain there, and he was able to kind of do a little church service while we ate, and then if you didn't want to go, everyone else went back to the barracks to eat. So after that, we went back to sling loading, and literally the entire rest of the day we just practiced our sequences. So they had it started off in groups because there were so many of us still, and there weren't that many sling loads. The lines were super long to get through. So they made one of the platoons just wait in the classroom while the other platoon rotated stations just to get through all the sling loads. Once everyone got through the sling loads, we switched. They made sure everyone went through all the sling loads, and once we did that, it was pretty much time for dinner already. After dinner, we had commander's time, which was an hour of mandatory sling loading practice, and after commander's time, they had about an hour and a half to 2 hours of almost like optional commander's time. It was the exact same thing as before, still just practicing your inspection sequence with clean sling loads, but it was optional. So a lot of people ended up going back to the barracks, and as the time went on, more and more people went. So it was nice because if you really wanted to practice, people would leave, and so it'd be easier to go through the loads and actually practice. When everyone's there, it takes forever. Like during the mandatory commander's time, in the hour we were there, I think I went through 2 loads. That was about it. Now I wasn't like trying to shove my way through the lines to make sure I got through as many as possible, but they were long lines. So after commander's time, when it was optional, it was just a lot more fun. So day 5 was almost exactly like day 4, except for this was the first day without PT. From this point onward, there was no more PT. I don't know if that's to get us ready for the 12-mile ruck, or if it's just because they no longer want to wake up that early. But they had said that day 4, which the 4-mile run, was the last PT session. So after that, day 5, waking up, we got to sleep in a little bit, and that was wonderful. We will never complain that we got the day off from PT after that. So we went out to the sling load stations again, and we did the exact same thing as yesterday, except for they didn't show us again how to rig it or anything. Instead, what they did is they went through and showed us each deficiency that could be wrong with every rig. So they had all the clean sling loads from the night before, and then they would go through, and each load they would put a couple errors in each one. So they showed us every single error that could be wrong with the sling load, or at least what you would find on a test. Technically, there could be other issues you could find in real life, but all the possibilities that could be on the test, they made sure to do it. So whether it was they replaced one rope with another, or they put the wrong sling set that can attach to one helicopter and they put it on the wrong load, or they twisted straps, all those issues, they made sure to put those there so we could practice seeing them and see what they look like and try to find them. After they showed us all those different errors, so we went through every single load, they then switched up all the errors so they weren't the same as before, and then we went back to practicing. So they put one of the platoons back in the classroom just to wait, and then we would go through and they would time us, and you had 2 minutes to try to find the errors in the load. So literally just practicing the test. Once you got through every single load, they switched platoons, and the other platoon came out and did the exact same thing while you're in the classroom just waiting around. That's all we did the entire day. They did switch up the errors a couple times, I think, and so it made it a little nicer, and it was fairly easy by the end, in my opinion. It got to the point where when we had our commander's time again, which was just an hour of mandatory sling load practicing, but you could go wherever you wanted, I actually pretty much stopped practicing my own inspection sequence, and I started helping others. And if you can do the same, I actually really recommend it. Not only does it help the person that you're trying to help, so you literally just watch them do the inspection, and you comment, critique, and just like say, hey, afterwards, don't do this while they're inspecting, but afterwards say, hey, did you check this item? Did you check this item? It helps them because they're like, oh, I forgot about that one. It helps them remember. But it also helps you, because when I did it, I remember thinking, oh, I'm trying to help them, but I realized it's helping me think through this so that while he's going, I have to look and see what he's missing. So not only am I looking for errors in the inspection, the sling load itself, but I'm checking for errors in the inspection process. So if you are decent enough, so I would say if you're still having trouble with it, don't go with this, but if you feel confident in your sling load inspection process, start helping someone else, because then you can find errors in their inspection process, which then helps you with yours. And it did help me, because there were a couple times in the actual test itself that I missed a couple items, and then I was able to think back and remember, I forgot to look at that. So I went back. If I had not helped someone else, I don't think I would have been able to remember that. I would have just ran around in circles and probably wouldn't have found the issues. So we had, again, another commander's time where it was an hour of mandatory inspections, and then after that they gave us another hour and a half, 2 hours of optional commander's time. So a lot of people went back to the barracks because they felt confident in it, and I stayed around with a bunch of other guys, and we just practiced sling loads the entire time. They did eventually start cleaning them up, so after 15-ish minutes, they told one of the groups to clean up their loads, so all the errors that were wrong with them, they fixed them, and so there were no longer any errors with the sling loads. And then you had that group of sling loads that you could go to and inspect if you just wanted to practice looking at all the items rather than looking for the errors. And eventually they got through all of them. All the sling loads were clean, and it was time to go to bed. The next day, so day 3 of phase 2, it was just tests, and it was a lot of waiting around. We took our written test first in the classroom, like always, and again, this was a super easy test. Don't go into this worrying that it's a lot of information and you're not going to be able to remember it all, because in this case, it was a lot less information than in phase 1, but they make sure you know everything for the test. Only 3 people failed the written test for phase 2, and they all got retakes, and I don't think a single one failed it the second time. So after the written test, once you got done taking it, you went back to the barracks just to wait for everyone else to finish. Once everyone finished their written test, they called you back in to the classroom, and you waited to take your sling load inspection, so your hands-on test. And that was some of the most waiting around we had done in the entire course. We've done a lot of waiting around. It's a pretty common theme in the course, but for the sling load test, they have to go through every single person, and you're not allowed to study beforehand. Like, once you go into the classroom, they tell you you can't have any study materials. So you are just waiting for your turn, and you have absolutely nothing to do. So they did allow us to take naps if we wanted to. You were sitting at a desk, so you kind of just crossed your arms and laid your head down, and it wasn't the most comfortable. All the lights were on, and people were being super loud, so it wasn't a very productive nap, but I took a nap, and some of my friends took naps, and it was I guess it was nice to have an option. But other than that, you're just waiting there doing absolutely nothing. That day they do give you 2 MREs. They give you 1 for breakfast, I believe, and 1 for lunch. And what I'll say is make sure you bring one of them, at least one of them, if not both of them, to the sling load testing, because what they do is you can eat the first one while you're waiting. If you haven't already eaten your first one, or if you don't have one for lunch and you fail your test, then you're just not going to be able to eat until after you take your retake, and that's many hours later. You wait in the classroom. When your group goes out to do the sling loading, you end up waiting right by the sling loads but facing away because they don't want you to look at them. And then they'll call you one by one to each station, and they want you to walk as fast as possible. I think they told us not to run, but just to walk as fast as possible, and you're not allowed to look at the sling loads. So you walk straight to your air assault sergeant. From there, your air assault sergeant's going to explain the rules real quick before you begin to ask. If you have any questions, pretty much just you have 2 minutes to look at the load, and you have 10 seconds to look at the brief. if you note a deficiency or if you turn around before that 10 seconds is up, your time for the sling load starts. Else it just starts when your 10 seconds is up. So you quickly, when they say go, you open your briefing, read through the items. It just says like the helicopter that's coming to pick it up, the weight of the sling load, if there's a nut on it, if it was tightened with a wrench or with like just hand tight. From there, you're going to turn around and you're going to just begin your inspection sequence. Don't rush this. I mean, you want to go quickly because you want to make sure to get it all done in 2 minutes, maybe with a little time to spare to check for any additional things if you missed them, but don't rush it. They say the biggest reason people mess this sequence up is because they practice it one way, and then when they actually go to the test, they're freaking out in their head, and they just rush the entire thing, and they miss half the things they should have caught, and they would have caught if they had just gone like they did when they practice it. So once you get done with that load, whether it's your time is up or you note all 4 deficiencies, they'll move you to the next load, and it just repeats the entire process. They say go, 10 seconds to look at the brief, 2 minutes to look at the sling load. I believe what they did for most people was if you found 4 of the errors, then from then on they would continue to let you try to find 4 errors. But as soon as you missed one, so if you only found 3 errors on one of them, from then on they didn't need you to find all 4 errors because there's no point. Pretty much if you're not going for a perfect score and trying to find 4 errors on all 4, they don't care. They just want you to pass, which is just 3 out of 4 deficiencies. So if you got 4 on the first one, they'll let you try to find 4 on the second one. If you find only 3 on the second one, from then on, once you hit 3 deficiencies, they're just going to say, okay, next. And you're just going to go straight into the next load. You do all 4 loads, which is the high mobility trailer, 5K cargo net, the Humvee, and the A22 cargo bag. Those are the 4 you're going to look at. So depending on what school you go to, they might show you how to do the shotgun Humvee. They might show you how to rig up fuel blivets or the water buffalo. But you're not going to be inspected on those ones, at least at Fort Benning. It was just those 4 that I mentioned before. Once you get done with your testing, assuming you passed, you go over to a table where they just check your name off, and they'll give you your stuff for rappelling. So you'll get your rope, your carabiner, and your gloves. Once you have that, they tell you to walk as fast as possible over back to the barracks, going around everything to make sure you don't talk to anybody, and then you're done pretty much for almost the entire rest of the day. If you failed though, you have much more to come. So if you fail any of the loads, you keep going and you do all the loads still, but they mark which one you failed, and they tell you to go sit in the bleachers. You then sit in the bleachers for a couple hours because you have to wait until every single person has taken their sling load test, and it took at least 3 to 4 hours to get through all of them, so it took a long time. You're just sitting in the bleachers. This is when, if you have your MRE, you could eat it, but there were a lot of people that thought, oh, I'm not going to need it, and they left it, and they ended up not eating at all. Once everyone's gone through, they bring everyone in the bleachers back. They retrain you on whatever you messed up. So if you only messed up the 5K cargo net, they just retrain you on the cargo net. If you just messed up the Humvee, they retrain you on just the Humvee. But if you messed up on the Humvee, the cargo net, and the cargo bag, they'll retrain you on all those. We had a few people that messed up 3, or we had a couple people that actually messed up on all 4 of them, but most people just messed up on 1, and I think the biggest issue they had was the A22 cargo bag. The cargo bag was, I think, the one that got most people. But once you get retrained, they start over for you guys on the testing, so whatever you need to be retrained on, you retest on just that 1 or however many you missed. Once you get through that, they do the same thing where you get your things for phase 3, and they send you back to the barracks, and it'll be the biggest relief of your life. They said that 96 people failed at least one of the loads during their first attempt, but we only had, I think it was like 10-ish people, whatever the numbers were in my first video. They only had that many people actually fail the whole thing, so it was still not nearly as many people that usually fail. Once everyone gets done with their retesting, so you're in the barracks pretty much just sitting around doing nothing, maybe taking a nap, or calling friends back home, they call everyone back out, and you bring your rope, your carabiner, and your gloves to the classroom. They start your briefing for phase 3, and they show you how to tie your Swiss seat. So that's pretty much the entire briefing, and that's the entire day of day 3 of phase 2. So it looks like my video went a little longer than I was planning, so I'm going to split up the phase 2 in 3 parts. So that's all for today, and stay tuned for my next video on phase 3 and graduation. So have a great day, guys.